The Waves of Tech is the down-to-earth tech podcast for you, your family, and your friends. We remove all the complicated, drawn-out explanations of technology and simply talk about how technology is influencing every element of our lives, from social media and the cloud to tweeting and mobile communication. We talk tech in a different way. So plug in your devices and listen as we get ready to ride the waves of tech.
On episode 440 of The Waves of Tech, safety tips for Lyft and Uber riders, 24-year-old pleads guilty to hacking Microsoft, and California taxes out-of-state sales. Find recent episodes of the podcast and connect with us on social media by heading over to thewavesoftech.com. Well, Steve, how's it going tonight, man?
I'm doing well. I wasn't with you last week, but you had a great episode with everything going on at you and a lot of the great interviews that you had out there in Palm Springs. And before that, we've had a couple guests. So it's been a few weeks since just you and I sat down and just kind of shot the breeze about tech.
Yeah, it has been three weeks, as a matter of fact, before it was just you and I solo, but really enjoyed episode 439, putting that together with my trip, as you mentioned, to Q in Palm Springs and sharing those interviews and conversations with a lot of people in educational technology. And also Stephen Hart, a brand strategist, was on episode 438. And if you guys missed any of those really great episodes, be sure to head over to thewavesoftech.com and check those out. Well, let's dive right into episode 440 here, Steve. A real quick Uber story I wanted to share from one of my coworkers. I was up chatting with him. He works a floor above me, and we were talking about going out of town. We're both big foodies, checking out food festivals and food trucks and the like. And he was giving me a couple recommendations in the Pasadena area in California, these like Eagle Rock, some other of these small little quaint areas. And he was saying that sometimes when he plans to go spend some time, like a weekend down in the greater Los Angeles area, he'll leave after work on a Friday. And once he gets, say, from Bakersfield to Valencia, which is about an 80-mile stretch, he will pick up people in Valencia. And Steve, he'll slowly work his way south by picking up Uber and Lyft riders along the way, which I thought was a really interesting way of making money being a ride-sharing driver as you're making your way down south to spend some time with friends and family. So he'll stop in Valencia, he'll drop somebody off, say, in Granada Hills, he'll go a little bit more south into Simi Valley, he'll go a little bit farther south, and he just slowly, Steve, works his way south and a little bit east until he gets to his destination. As a non-Uber or Lyft driver, or someone that really is, I've only taken maybe 10, 12 ride-sharing trips in my life, but to think of it from the other side as the worker and the driver, just being able to make a little bit of cash along the way to your destination, I thought was a really cool spin, because I've only heard of people really doing things regionally. I'm going to stay in this area of my city, I'm only going to travel X amount of miles away from my home, XYZ, whatever calculation equation people are using. But I thought it was a really interesting way, Steve, of capitalizing on that Friday need to get people from work to home or home to bar, wherever they're going. I just thought it was a really cool story, and I thought I'd share it with everybody here.
Actually, I've never taken an Uber or a Lyft, and I've never talked to certainly one of the drivers, but it's kind of an interesting story because, it really makes sense. Why not pay for your weekend adventure while you're doing it anyway? Everybody's always looking for a ride. The ride-sharing world has gone mad, and, it's booming business. I didn't know if you were kind of stuck within a certain locale or if you could pretty much go anywhere. I know at one time I had looked into some of the qualifications and things, and I just got tired of reading about it. But it's really interesting, and for somebody that either just enjoys it or wants to make a little extra money, especially if you're heading to a specific locale anyway, makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And I'm pretty sure a lot of other Lyft or Uber drivers are doing this. I don't think they're necessarily regionally bound or city bound. I thought I'd share it. I had never thought about it because I don't think like a Uber or Lyft or other ride-sharing platform driver, because I don't do that. But it was a really cool way to start your weekend off, put a little bit of extra money in your bank account, maybe earn that money for your weekend, but also kind of explore different areas and drive around and get accustomed to sort of the people and the culture and the cities you're around. Well, Steve, that kind of leads into our first big topic for the night. And this is really 8 safety tips for Uber and Lyft drivers. And this, sadly, this report from people.com was was provided after the killing of a University of South Carolina student. Her name is Samantha Josephson, and sadly, we'll have the link into the show notes, but you can see the video where she actually slipped into the back seat of a black car without hesitation. And she had ordered an Uber, and she inadvertently thought that it was the Uber that was picking her up, and she slid into the back seat looking for a ride home after a night out with friends. But according to police and according to the confession of this individual, he was a killer. And so she was reported missing early Friday morning, and on Saturday she was found dead by some hunters in the woods more than 90 minutes from where she had last been seen. And as I said, the individual has confessed to kidnapping and murdering Samantha, and sadly she's not with us anymore, but it does bring up the fact that there are some major safety concerns, and there are some major things that we need to look ahead to, and things we need to put in our little toolbox, Steve, to keep ourselves safe when we're out there, because we know there's not always, friendly people out in that world, and we have people that are seeking to do harm to others when they're simply out just having a good time. But what are some of those things that people can do? Because I know it's a scary time. I look through this list, Steve, and I know there's ways I can improve my safety when I'm out there taking a Lyft or an Uber.
I think a lot of times we don't see in front of us some of the potential harms or hazards of daily life and things that we do. Unfortunately, I don't even like having these kind of discussions in our show, but it's something that we need to do to get information out there, to disseminate good, bad, and the ugly. This, unfortunately, is a despicable, heinous, disgusting, I don't even know what to call it, thing that an individual did to a poor, innocent young lady who was just needing her Uber ride and unfortunately ended up dead. So we all need to be cognizant of our surroundings, and you never know who is who or what intents are. Some of the things, Dave, maybe we'll just go back and forth on these. The first thing, certainly when you're using a ride sharing, is match the license plate number of the car with the app. So, of course, when you ask for a share ride, you're going to get the who in the car and all that. Make sure that license plate number matches up so you ensure that is your driver.
Yeah, I'm actually really bad at this one, Steve. I usually match the type of vehicle, the make and model, and the color with what's in the app, but I rarely check the license plate. And that's a really good thing because there are several, my wife and I drive a white Camry, and if there's 100 other white Camrys on the road, we see them. And so for anybody that's using, driving a Nissan Altima, there's plenty of those that are driving around that are black or blue or anything. And it's a really good idea to not only match that, but most importantly, match that license plate. The second one, Steve, is you need to ask, first and foremost, who are you waiting for? So this actually, in fact, puts the onus on the driver to say your first name, your last name, instead of just going up and saying, are you my ride? She said, she being someone who works for Fix, said, when I approach an Uber or Lyft, I stand next to the driver's window and I'll ask them, who are you waiting for? This way, they have to give you a name. And Uber, in fact, actually launched a public awareness campaign trying to prevent people from getting into the wrong car because of this, where it's like, yes, I am your ride. Go ahead and get in. I'll take you where you requested. That's when things get into trouble. But you need to put that responsibility on that driver, because we all have good intuition, and somebody needs to say, I am picking up Dave, or I am waiting for Mr. Lee, whatever it is. And that's just one really good thing you need to make sure that you ask every time you do it.
Visual cues are very important. So make sure you look at the photo in the app and identify the person, the driver, because, unfortunately, once you're in the car, you're pretty much stuck in there. So know who you are looking for.
I think also you can add that to Steve. There's been several times I've got into a Lyft and said, are you Jeff? Are you Brandon? Are you whoever? Anybody can say, yes, I'm that. So maybe also, in addition to just looking at the photo and confirming, you can ask, what is your name? Very just innocently, just say, what is your name? And make sure that adds up as well. I think that's another good way of getting that information. Another one would be wait for your ride indoors. Uber website actually provides some additional tips suggesting that we do, in fact, wait indoors, and says avoiding spending an unnecessary time outside alone with your phone in your hand. Instead, wait indoors until the app shows your ride has arrived. And I think this is really important, but also I think this is something with ride sharing where people believe you have to be on the porch on the edge of the corner or whatever in front of that restaurant waiting so that your Lyft or Uber driver doesn't leave. They're going to stay there because they're going to get paid for you. So if you can put yourself behind a little protective barrier, a door, a wall, a railing, whatever it is, keep yourselves distant, but indoors so you're safe, so you're not being distracted by other things that are going on, or even perhaps misinterpret a vehicle or a person. So I think that's actually a really good idea, is to wait for your ride indoors.
And also never reveal personal details. I never would, but I suppose some people would, and that's perhaps exchanging of phone numbers or addresses or other personal detailed information that perhaps somebody could come looking for you at a later time. Not a good thing.
Not a good thing at all. One other thing that's also recommended is always ride in the back seat. You put yourself, Steve, in that front seat. You're putting yourself at some vulnerability. I say put yourself in the back seat. Ensure that you can have a safe exit, either side of the vehicle. Obviously, give yourself and your driver some personal space, but you need to provide that barrier. So if this individual, whoever's driving, is reaching for you or trying to do something inappropriate or explicit, whatever it may be, you need to at least have some distance there so that you're not at somebody's mercy being so close to them in proximity.
I was thinking of this while you were talking. In most cars today, Dave, when you hit the door lock button, it automatically locks all doors. So if you're a passenger, and especially if the child locks are engaged, you're not going to be able to escape through those back doors. So when you get in a car, think about it as some type of emergency exit, whether it's being able to strangle somebody or kicking out a door or whatever the case may be.
Or request that door stay unlocked.
Very good idea.
Yep.
One of the things that is also recommended is share the trip details with a friend. I think there's nothing more important. I think we do it a lot when we're going on longer trips on an airplane or stuff. We will give to our family and friends, itineraries and stuff like this. Do it also with ride sharing. And if something seems to be going late or afoul, the authorities can be notified.
Yeah, don't forget that also in 2017, when Uber did this really public, kind of service announcements, when they said how to protect yourselves, they also allow you as a rider to share your trip details by tapping within their app, share status. And this shares the driver's name, the driver's photo, license plate, and location. And so this actually enables people that you're messaging to track where you are, to see your ETA without even downloading the Uber app. And that's according to the Uber website. I'm not sure what Lyft has as far as that share status. I gotta think that they have something in place for that. The beautiful part about that, Steve, is people don't have to have the app. You're just simply sharing out information about where you are, who's driving you, where you're going to go, and what time you're going to show up. So yeah, sharing those details. And once you're in the car, you should share that status as soon as you can. And finally, rate your driver is a really big thing. Fix recommends rating drivers. The rating is ideal for really weeding out those potentially harassing, dangerous, questionable drivers. And she recommends being respectful to drivers so that your own rating, of course, is good. But what the rating of the drivers really helps improve the Uber experience for everybody. So it's just not ride sharing for you from, say, restaurant to home or to work from home. It's about sort of that global support, that 24/7 sort of vision about how these reviews, how these feedbacks allow. And also by providing that feedback, Uber can look at that and follow up with any appropriate action. And of course, document any reports of conduct that may violate any guidelines, any rules for drivers. As you said, Steve, that laundry list is long. That empowers you to empower Uber to revoke any sort of status that a driver may have. So if you feel uneasy, if you feel like you're in a dangerous situation, make sure you're rating them so that other people are empowered to do that same thing.
It's unfortunate that this incident happened, and my heart is just bleeding for the family. Let's protect the rest of us and each other by following some very simple but yet very important tips on how to be safe when you're using ride sharing.
Yeah, we'll have this link in the show notes. We do encourage everybody, if you click on the show links over at thewaysofTech.com or just search at people.com, share this with people who are using Lyft and Uber or any other ride sharing platform that's out there. It's really important. And 8 simple tips that are, Stephen, the thing I love about those tips, very easy to implement, very, very simple things that you can keep in the back of your mind. I would actually like to see, Steve, some of these apps sort of prompt you when you're in that. Did you share your status? Did you recommend your driver, or will you recommend your driver? You know, some of those prompts within the app to really enhance that ability to protect their riders and keep some of those people out of the cars and off the streets and out of the lives of people that are doing harm. And sadly, as you said, the story brings up reasons that we have to be concerned about, but also empowers us to make sure we have everything at our disposal and at our resource to at least have a safe and comfortable ride home. Well, Steve, let's switch gears a little bit here and talk about a security researcher where he pled guilty to hacking into Microsoft and Nintendo. And this tagline really got me, Steve. I found it over on Twitter. It says, a 24-year-old security researcher hacked Microsoft, got arrested, hacked Nintendo while he was on bail, pled guilty, and got off without jail time. And right when I read that, I was like, I've got to look at this story. And it was written by Tom Warren, who's a big Microsoft journalist and an individual in the UK that really covers Microsoft in a lot of detail. And in fact, this gentleman is the 24-year-old security researcher is from the UK. So he actually narrowly avoided prison. I think this was perhaps sometime last week, maybe 5-6 days ago. But he actually admitted in a London Crown Court to hacking into Microsoft and Nintendo servers and stealing confidential information. This gentleman goes by the name of Zamus Clark, also known online as Slipstream and Rayleigh. And of course, he was charged on multiple counts of computer misuse and pled guilty, as I mentioned, to hacking into Microsoft and Nintendo networks. Just hearing that headline and kind of diving into it, I don't want to go into all the excruciating detail, but prosecutors actually proved and revealed that Clark had gained access to Microsoft's server back in late January 2017. So it's been close to 2.5 years. And so he's actually using an internal username and password and then uploaded a web shell to remotely access Microsoft's network freely. And he did this for about 3 weeks. He was able to comb through their network. And of course, Clark then uploaded multiple shells, which allowed him to search through Microsoft network. He was able to upload files and also download data. And according to court reports, he stole around 43,000 files, and they were really targeted at Microsoft's internal Windows flighting servers. And Steve, he did this all through his gained access through his VPNs and used similar software to hack into Nintendo's highly confidential. He hacked into their game development servers, and so those servers actually stored development code for a lot of unreleased games. And he was also able to steal close to 3,000 usernames and passwords until actually Nintendo eventually discovered the breach in May of 2018, so about 9-10 months ago. Pretty crazy story here, Steve, where Nintendo actually estimated damages up to $1.8 million. And I think Microsoft gave a vague estimate about $2 million in damages. So it's pretty crazy, Steve. He was employed at a Malwarebytes security company at the time of the Microsoft hack. So someone who obviously clearly admitted to doing it and got out with jail time. He did have some of the community service. He was sentenced to 6 months of house arrest, but it's pretty crazy story, Steve, and just goes to show like these people are finding ways in, no matter how they're getting it. They're getting the information, they're collecting data, they're skimming download data and uploading files and everything in between. Quite a crazy story, in my opinion.
There's something about this where I got to be pretty stern in what I'm going to say, Dave, because I think too many times we become lackadaisical with things that are going on in the digital world when it comes to hacking, and to let someone off that entered 2 zones of no-no is wrong and needs to be punished. And punished is not by community service or a small fine. It's jail time. They really need to put the screws down to people that are caught behind the scenes doing this kind of dirty work. Otherwise, we are never going to get our arms around this and to be able to deter individuals from continuing to try to crack and hack various services. The second part to this is it can lead to a damaging eye to some. Microsoft, okay? So they got hacked, so how am I to have confidence in Microsoft when it comes to using cloud services of theirs if they can't even keep their own house clean or protect their own information? If I want to use Azure or any of the products that I have my information, knowing that, man, you guys were hacked. How safe is my stuff? I think leads to kind of a marketing damage point that also needs to be looked at. So it's not necessarily, I don't think, that the guy just got in and he took some files and la-da-da-da-da. I think there's lingering effects behind any kind of a break-in when it comes to the cyber environment. And of course, lastly, there are stories like this every day, all day. We have got to figure out a way. It's a kind of on a little different note, but the Federal Trade Commission today was able to shut down one of the biggest call spammers systems that there is, even though I got 3 of them today, so it must not be totally out yet. But there are government agencies, private agencies working on combating all this. And I don't think we can just wash our hands and say, okay, you admitted it. You did a good boy. You cleaned up some trash around the parking lot. We'll let you go. In my view, Dave, it doesn't cut it.
No, it doesn't cut it. I mean, when you look at, he was also part of, I'm not sure if many people remember Vtech data breach from 2005. And Vtech is like toys, and so they have like registration accounts for like, toys and data collection and stuff, and including a lot of children's accounts. So there's these younger toy models that are out there, and so names, birthdays, profile images, addresses were stolen. He fully admitted to the Vtech breach, but of course the toy maker did not wish to assist with the prosecution, didn't go any further. They eventually just paid a fine of upwards of $500,000 for violating children's privacy. But again, this guy has been involved with a number of hacks. You go Vtech, you go Microsoft, you now go at Nintendo. He's caused upwards of close to almost $5 million in damages. He obviously has the tools and resources to make things happen without any detection, without any people noticing for, several months, if not years. And so at what point, Steve, does a society, does a court finally determine that you need to take these things seriously? Because the risk of reoffending for this guy, he can do it again knowing that, oh, I've done 3 major breaches in data minings and I've got no jail time at all. Maybe he's paying some fines, maybe he has some restrictions on where he can go and not go. But at what point is cybersecurity and these data hacks going to be taken seriously? Because as you said, there is a tremendous amount of vulnerability out there. If this guy got into Microsoft with internal passwords and usernames, what else can this guy do, right? I mean, we'll have the full link at theverge.com in our show notes, but, he did a lot over a 4-year period, and you can't even say you got a slap on the wrist, right? It just goes to show, yes, there's a lot of companies, Steve, that are committed to protecting property. They're always evaluating and trying to update their data protection security protocols. We know that's going on. But at what point are we going to hold these people to the fire and say, this is the punishment that's appropriate for what you did? Otherwise, you're going to have these individuals and people within the space that are continuing to break down these walls without any recourse or without any repercussions and consequences for what they've done.
Interesting that he did work for Malwarebytes, and I have a lot of respect for the company Malwarebytes. Their endpoint protection we use for all of my customers. It's a great product, but of course, you don't know what employees are doing in the darkness with a hoodie in the closet. So I don't know how long we have to talk about it, probably for the rest of our lives when it comes to cybersecurity and threats, and it goes on and on and on, Dave. But, we all have to still be cognizant of it, but we also have to be part of the voice that says enough's enough and let's do something about it. And if we're going to be silent and not do anything, well, then certainly the hackers are going to win the war. Dave, over the last few years, certainly there's been continued discussion about sales tax, especially when it comes to the exchange of monies over the internet. And the Supreme Court ruling with South Dakota versus Wayfair, which the decision was to the state of South Dakota, basically when it comes to the taxation of over the internet sales, has really kind of, I don't want to say throw a tailspin into things, but has made the internet quite not what it used to be. And I think in the pre-show, you and I were talking, it's 30 states now that require sales tax collections based on sales. And California went to effect today. And I'm kind of shocked because normally you would think them or New York as being probably the first to the batter's box when it comes to any kind of way to make money, to be honest with you. When we talk about this as a whole, I think it's an interesting discussion in the fact that when we talk brick and mortar versus online sales, what is the differential? But I want to really stress that brick and mortar sales tax collection is based on any kind of sale. And with the majority of these online transactions, there's typically caveats so that smaller online retailers are not harmed. And many of the states have limitations or specifications of what constitutes them having to collect sales tax. In the case of California, it's more than $100,000 in taxable sales and at least 200 separate transactions for the delivery into the state. I think that's very important that we look at because knowing California like we do, I mean, they actually gave a break to somebody. But this is now into effect, and you're going to start paying a sales tax of 7.25% based on those transactions, Dave.
Yeah, the South Dakota versus Wayfair Inc. This dates back to a 2017 Supreme Court, and again, it's it pretty much held that states can in fact charge tax on purchases made from out-of-state sellers. And I think the key element here, Steve, was even if the seller does not have a physical presence in the taxing state. And so what the court found is that the physical presence constraint they determined to be, quote, unsound and incorrect, which was really interesting, where they determined that the business, even though it has no physical presence in a state, was actually establishing a nexus through its economic and virtual contacts within the state. So, I'm surprised, Steve, once 2017 ruling came down, California wasn't one of the first to adopt. And usually, as you said, New York, California, some other states often are leading the charge when it comes to these things. And they really put off for well over 2 years about getting this into place. Now, there was a lot of deliberation. There was a lot of negotiation between different agencies, probably with some outside states as well. But ultimately, the California Department of Tax and Fee Administration came up with their response and said, okay, here it is. And you mentioned a little bit that California was allowing a lot of exceptions for a lot of the small sellers. They did not want to impact, just those small online retailers that weren't making more than $100,000 in taxable sales, that weren't delivering more than 200 separate transactions into California. But if you meet any of those thresholds, now you're going to have to be paying that tax. And Steve, digital goods and services are not generally subject to California tax right now, unless the purchaser obtains like a tangible piece of property, like storage media or something like that as part of this transaction. So there's still some bugs to be worked out in the modern 2019 and moving forward digital age, but I think most importantly, Steve, the advice I can give to people is trying to figure this out. Contact, perhaps if you have a really good trusted tax advisor, you can contact the Department of Tax and Fee Administration directly. Also, we'll have a link in the show notes here that Avalera, has a state-by-state guide to sales tax rules. And I think that's a really good place to start to try and educate yourself on what's moving forward, what people have done in the past. And it's a really interesting caveat, Steve, and it's definitely going to affect a lot of those within the tech sector, because we know there's a lot of out-of-state talent and there's a lot of out-of-state businesses that provide sales and services and goods and products well over the $100,000 mark. And that many of the online retailers are serving more than 200 transactions into California. Some of those are doing them on a daily basis. Some of them, maybe a 6-month interval or whatever. But I think this is a really big transition for California. And they're, as I mentioned, 30th state in the union to get that. But this was a big decision back in 2017. And finally, I think we're seeing more and more of this come to the surface, and states are saying, okay, this is allowed. The Supreme Court's allowing it. Where can we start finding different sources of revenue to pay for, whether that transportation investment needs to go into the roads and in whatever, the bridges, if they're transporting goods across state services, whatever. So there's a lot of things to be worried about, because you do have a lot of companies that could be, I don't say they're going to take their business out of California, because we are the 5th largest economy in the world, much ahead of a lot of bigger countries at that, so I think they're still going to stay in here, but just educating yourself on what's moving forward is going to be the largest thing.
So it really doesn't matter. I mean, wherever we go anymore, we're going to pay various kinds of tax on product. But, when it comes to the online sales, I take a little bit different view. Personally, don't believe there should be a tax if I'm buying not within a certain locale or state. That's just my personal opinion. But however they generate revenue, they're going to be doing. I hope that some businesses don't attempt to skate out on their lawful requirements. And I'm glad that for smaller ones that there is, some type of break, Dave. With all that said, here it comes. More out of my pocket, at least.
Yeah, and I guess I fall a little bit on the other side where, Steve, I expect to pay sales tax wherever I go. If I'm buying something online, I expect to pay a 7%. If I'm out eating dinner, if I'm out having a beer at the grocery store, whether I'm buying something online, I guess just it's ingrained. It's like, okay, how much is the sales tax? It's wired into me. So I don't really think I'm going to notice much of a shift on my buying habits, but also maybe, I don't know. We'll have to maybe try and get some insights, and maybe a year from now be able to find some research on if companies are complying with it. What are some of the drawbacks to doing it? Are they still investing heavily in California? I would think so. We have a population pushing almost 40 million. I think it's like 38.5 million. As I mentioned, fifth largest in the economy. It's pretty crazy. So I guess welcome to the new age of digital tax and everything in between, right?
I guess eventually everything just kind of bleeds together, right? So, Dave, one of the things that has been kind of interesting to watch throughout the birth and the transition and the fruition of the internet, and especially when it comes to web-based email, is various email systems. And we've had AOL, man, that's a tongue twister, or
it can be.
You've got mail. How's that?
Everyone knows that.
To Hotmail, to Yahoo Mail. Some of them really stunk. Some of them ended up charging. Most of them have just gone to the wayside, although there are still many web-based free services out there. But really the one that has really rocked the world has been Gmail. And today is the 15th anniversary of Gmail, started in 2004. I gotta say that if you really don't have an email address with perhaps a business name, domain name, or something like that, you've probably got Gmail. And Gmail, I think, is probably one of the bigger successes when it comes to Google. And it's kind of interesting because they have, a few months ago, I think it was, they decided that they are no longer going to support, but bring down their email app, which is called Inbox. They're going to throw that in the trash can. But even though as Gmail continues to move on strong and has been part of the important legacy when it comes to the birth and follow-on of the internet, is 15 years old now. So I know you use it. I know I have a Gmail accounts for, I guess, non-important stuff in terms of mine. Some people do. That are not domain-based email addresses. But, it's a service that I think has really been great for a lot of people. They don't have to use their ISP. For a long time, I had to have like brighthouse.com or whoever your internet provider was. Couldn't always get the name you wanted. And I think it's one of the bursts that is really important when it comes to the internet. And happy birthday to Gmail.
Yeah, there's some interesting things about Gmail that I learned today. And again, we'll have this link in the show notes over at thewavesofTech.com. But Steve, you may be able to elaborate a little bit on this. I didn't realize Google began as an invite only, to the point where invitations were actually being bought and sold on eBay as if they were some sort of precious commodity, right? I learned that invitations were going to remain the sole way of signing up for the service until 2007. And of course, while Yahoo and Yahoo and Hotmail existed, I think the real selling point, I did realize this, was that Gmail was offering a gigabyte of free service. And in 2007, that was like, okay, now's the time to jump on over. And once it became open for everybody, it just became the default, the one that people used. And I think what I love most about how Gmail started, and there's a great little screenshot here on the article, it says, the first email you always get, and I remember getting this, was Gmail is different. Here's what you need to know. And I remember getting that email when I signed up originally with Gmail. But I love what Gmail has done because they really helped introduce a number of other services for you to use. They have integrated Gmail into your Google Calendar. It was also integrated previously with like Google Tasks, ticket confirmations. You could share large files with Google Drive. The arrival of G Suite, in 2006 really made it really an indispensable product. And people, even my wife and her coworkers now, just use Google Drive relentlessly. And, that really set the stage when Gmail was introduced 15 years ago. It's built upon year after year. And sometimes we see Google, as we talked about just briefly, Google Plus and, shutting down, and they try to integrate Google Buzz back in the day. Those definitely failed, as networking projects, but not everything has worked perfectly. But I think looking at the trajectory and the history of Gmail, it has really helped build what we know as, Google today. And I think it's been really helpful for a lot of people to manage, to organize their email better. They continue to adapt their web interface and also their apps to make sure they're user friendly, to make sure that people are enjoying what they're doing. Some things that people enjoy, like smart reply, smart compose features, a lot of those predictive text kind of models work for some people, not as much. But I think Gmail in its entirety, Steve, has become more intelligent, has become a little bit more intellectual. And I think Gmail started and has really created this really usable, user-friendly platform that we know today.
Yeah, it's certainly one of the highlights of Google. And if you've been listening to this show long enough, you certainly also understand why the majority of the Google stuff is free. It's because what they are doing with it. However, I think Gmail is a perfect starting platform for anybody. If grandma or grandpa needs an email address or whatever the case may be, instead of having to buy Microsoft Office to be able to use Outlook or whatever, you can use a web-based interface, or you can actually add it as an IMAP service to any client. I think Gmail is up to 15 gigabytes now, I think, of storage, which if you have that kind of email, that's a ton. Also, one of the interesting things when we look back at history is this was also released on April Fool's Day. So certainly when that came out, everybody thought, yeah, right, Google's going to give you free email gigabyte, blah, 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 blah. But it was in fact true. And it is one of the services that I don't ever see going away when it comes to Google.
Yeah, I don't think. I think it's been a powerhouse in the email space for a number of years. I don't see anything in at least the foreseeable future, no matter the obstacle, that's really going to take down Gmail. It's going to likely remain the king. And I think Gmail, and rightfully so, Google has really created their ecosystem. You're using Chrome, you're using Gmail, you're using Google Drive, you're using all of these different elements. It just makes sense to live in that ecosystem, as you said. If you can go without Outlook, or if you're going to get that awkward, come up with your own @ plus Spectrum plus Pack Bells, whatever, .com you came up with at the time. This is your inbox. It's your email. It's you have all these services that you can run with it. And I just think it's been a really great project for them. I think it's really been super helpful. But also you have search, you have maps, you have YouTube integrated now, you have photos. I even forgot about photos. I love that. Google Translate, you have shopping, you have your calendar, as I mentioned, Google Play. I mean, everything's so integrated now, and it all started from just an invite only 2004 email platform that's really changed the way we communicate and the way we, interact with each other, and the way we manage our emails.
I think it's always important that we talk about these birthdays, Dave. We do it periodically when something has come up with a major milestone, because these are the things that have made what we enjoy. They are the things that make life and work easier. They are the things that make technology spin, so they will continue to spin off new product. Although Google has a habit of certainly tearing down everything they have built except for search and Gmail, it's a platform that has been beneficial to not only you and I, but to students and people across the globe. And I think it's a very instrumental part of our technology life and basis of today.
Absolutely. Well, Steve, I think that's going to wrap up episode 440 of the episode. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. If you missed any of our previous episodes, make sure you guys head over to thewavesoftech.com. And of course, you can follow us over there on social media. If you guys have anything you want us to discuss, you want us to share, any sort of ideas, we're always welcome. We're always willing to hear what you guys have to say. So be sure to come on next week. Steve and I will be diving again into more technology discussion. Thank you all for tuning in, and don't forget to keep on teching.